All right. Hello, everyone. This is the Startup Society's Foundation podcast. Today, we are joined by Dr. Titus Gebel of the Free Private Cities Limited. Dr. Titus, how do you do today?
I'm fine. Thank you, Joe.
Excellent. So we're very excited about your project, and I'm just wondering if you could tell me, what is a free private city?
Yeah, Free Private City is actually a private for-profit company that is on a given territory offering you protection for life, liberty, and property against a certain payment. And your position is guaranteed in a written contract. So there's no social fictional contract or fictional social contract that is constantly changed by one side, normally to your disadvantage. But it's a real written contract like we know from normal markets in the product and services sector. And basically, this is really this is a service provider, right? You can call it a government service provider if you want, but it's basically really put the market down to what I call the market of living together. And if you like the offer, you choose it. If you don't like it, you don't. The most difficult thing is, of course, finding a state that is willing to grant part of his territory for this venture. But it's not so much different from a special economic zone that has an own legal jurisdiction. What we already have seen in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, for example, they have implemented basically English common law. And this is what I want to do is to bring this to the next level. And we are currently negotiating in Honduras and in French Polynesia with the seasteading guys to see if something like that is possible and feasible.
So what was the inspiration for this idea?
Well, actually, I saw that after 30 years of political engagement, that it's not possible to argue, to convince people that free market and a free society is really something that can win a majority. It will probably never do in a democratic society, because if you're offering social welfare and that kind of let's call it free lunch, those political directions will always prevail over basically being self-responsible and having free markets. So what I thought we could do instead is create an alternative product, a niche product. Let's say it's like a classical liberal state, but it's not a state. It's a service provided by a private company, and then you are free to go there. And if this will be successful, then others will see, okay, maybe the idea is not that bad. Maybe we should change our own systems a little bit into that direction. And the other very important thing is that not all people might have the same idea of how they want to live together, right? Even if we think that classical liberal or libertarian ideas are superior and better, they might not be for all of the people. They might lead to bigger wealth in certain areas, but maybe some people just don't demand that. And in so far, for me, I've really turned into the direction that it's the variety, it's the diversity of different models that is the solution to the problems of today's policy. And if you really have more competition in this market, and I'm trying to create more competition by offering this free private city, but this also would mean that other models are equally legitimate to flourish as long as participation is based on voluntariness. This is the only real, I would say, requirement that I would set. I would say, I mean, it must be completely voluntary to enter and to leave. And as long as this is given, that is fine. And then we will find out over the years, and maybe in the year 2050, the most successful societies will not subscribe to any of today's ideologies. Who knows that? Let the market decide. I'm convinced that the societies that have the most economic and the most personal freedom together will flourish best. And it's also my philosophical conviction that you cannot force people into things that they don't want to, because you also don't want to be forced by other people into that. So it's a relatively easy ideology. It's basically the golden rule, and you put it into practice. But practice means, of course, that you have some rules, that you have your contract, and you can kick out people who misbehave and all that.
That's a very interesting thought, to allow a plurality of different ideas to be tried out. However, how do you see these experiments interacting with one another? Will they form some sort of network or confederation so that they can adjudicate disputes that will probably arise?
Yeah, I mean, probably there will be, or let's assume that one or two of these free private cities will flourish. And since you can make money with that, it is very important to make a rational and reasonable use of your resources and to improve quality and lower the costs. That's why the profit motive is so important. But if it's working at one or two places, definitely other free private cities will spread, because you can make money, and because the government see that if they grant companies that part of their territory, they also can benefit, right? Because they have more jobs than people. For the local economy, it would be advantages, and maybe they will also be shareholder or get a certain income out of these free private city in exchange for their willingness to grant their territory. So over time, if it's working once, it will work several times. And then, now coming back to your question, I think that we can see a world of really many free private city, or not so free, but other systems that are new but have voluntary membership, maybe even based on some fantasy literature, and the societies that are fitting together or will have something in common. It's relatively natural that they will ally, and so you will have some many years from now, but you could have something like a new Hanseatic League, that especially the cities that have the same economic and personal freedom, the same ideas, that they support each other. Maybe even they are allied with other states, with smaller states that have similar ideas, or other communities. So I think this is inevitable. If it's working once or twice, it will work several times, and it will happen.
Excellent. I like that approach. And I'm just going off of the vein of diplomacy. Could you expand a little bit on what are the best strategies to gain partial sovereignty from states in order to build these free private cities?
Yeah, I think you have to differentiate between two things. The one is the ideal free private city model, where really you have absolutely freedom to do what you want, unless you are hurting others. This is sort of the classical model, and you have a contract and says you have to pay this and that per year for that, and that's it basically. And you have independent arbitration if there's a problem between you and the provider, or between you and other residents. This is the ideal model, but in reality, this is not going to happen, at least not in the beginning. You have a lot of well, first of all, if you can find a state who is willing to grant you that, it will probably be on the idea for this state that this is something like a special economic zone, and he can attract more business to his territory. And in exchange, he's giving some freedoms, including our right to establish our own legal system. But then he would probably say, well, but we don't like drug dealing or weapon trading and all that stuff. And by the way, we have signed some international agreements regarding labor protection, labor laws, etc. So there will be agreement between the parent state or the host nation and the free private city, and this will lay out some requirements for how the free private city is set up. This will be certainly a little bit disappointing in the beginning for some of the enthusiasts and hardcore libertarians, but this is how the world works. And in my view, it's not possible to come up from the beginning with a perfect world. You have to make compromises, and then over time, if this concept proves that it's going to work, you can increase your liberties and basically design your own system really like you want to have it done. But in the beginning, we have to live with the world that we have, and this is coming that even the bigger countries don't have real sovereignty. Which country has real sovereignty today? It's maybe the US, China, and Russia. And all the rest, they can put pressure on them, and these countries, even if they want to, they cannot behave as they want. And so we have to take this into account as well. It means we have to negotiate for the biggest economic and personal freedom possible for the right to regulate our own affairs, but we will have to make some concessions. And again, over time, our situation might become stronger if governments see that they can gain something from having a free private city within their territory. Imagine a new Hong Kong in the Mediterranean, right? That would be, for every country that would hosting this Hong Kong, that would be certainly a gain. And if this is working, then other countries would be willing to give more concessions just to attract free private cities. So this is the strategy, and it's certainly a long-term strategy.
No, absolutely. I agree. We cannot be entirely idealistic in the face of large international institutions that have norms set up, but we have to do our best in a given situation. So you mentioned special economic zones. Could you tell us the difference between a free private city and a special economic zone, especially a privately run special economic zone?
Yeah, I think the main difference is that the free private city will have more autonomy than the special economic zones, especially with regard to the legal system. So we would bring our own private law system, be it a common law system or an established civil law system, within the free private city, because in many countries, their system and their courts are not really reliable. There are two things. One, the government and the parliament are changing the rules constantly, which is creating instability and insecurity and regime uncertainty for any investor and any new resident. And the second thing is corruption, of course. And if we bring an own and a well-recognized private legal system, own courts, and own security, we would guarantee thereby to any potential investor, and of course to all the freedom-loving residents, that their rights will be regarded and will be taken into account as it was written in the contract. And the contract is not going to be changed. I mean, you see this, you have a problem with some special economic zones in countries where basically the government or the parliament can withdraw all the rules basically any time. And this is a danger for many special economic zones. That is something we want to overcome by creating an own system and by getting a guarantee of the host nation that we will have this stability for, say, 50 years, guaranteed for 50 years or something. You have precedents for that when investor protection is given for bigger ventures that is working into that direction. You have also, you can also see sometimes that there are 50 years guarantee that there will be no change in the tax system. And we want this for basically our whole system. We say, okay, we have the contract with the government, with the host nation, and we are willing to stick to that contract. But on the other hand, we are expecting the government to stick to the contract as well and give us our 50-year stability. you put in some investor protection clauses in that, so that it would be really painful if the government would then just ignore what it has signed. This is also something that is not completely new to the world. You have had such negotiations, especially if big companies want to make big investments in other countries, and this would be the same approach that we would follow.
So this is an interesting approach. In order to guarantee regime certainty and some sort of rule of law, you're having rule based by shareholders and a CEO rather than suspect to a legislator. So do you plan to IPO, or even thinking a little bit farther, ICO your private city?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, this is one idea that every city is an own entity, even if it belongs to the same company, and maybe over time, even the residents take over major shareholder, the major shareholding in the city, and then you can even IPO. But I think one of the most important things for me, and it was one of the things I recognized in our daily living in our world of today, is the problem that around this idea of a social contract is that one side can change the contract and I can't. Mm-hmm. There's something intrinsically wrong with that. So I want to have a contract where I can rely on the contract, and I want the other party also to be that they can rely on the contract. So if I am offering a free private city and a related contract to the residents and the businesses and the landowners in the free private cities, I would really want this contract and the respective rules to be unchanged forever. I know that it's not possible. There will be some things where you need to adapt your contract, but then you can come back to the common law system, which also started like that, right? They were starting with the existing common law at a certain point in time, and over time, when new things come up or things that weren't regulated before, then the courts were finding a solution to that. And by doing so, they were really balancing the interests of both parties and came up with a new decision. And this was then the law of the land from this time on. And this is my idea how we further develop the rules in such an entity, so that we can make sure that this is a balanced interest-based decision and not a political decision because I want to favor my group, my cronies, or my personal financial interests, and therefore I make this regulation and not the other one. So this is the idea. We will see how this works. Probably in the first years we will have to have a gremium that is making additional rules or change the rules a little bit, but the idea is really that you pay for what you get, and then you know, okay, I can rely on that rules, and there's no forum for the do-gooders and the world improvers to change the rules according to their view of the world. So this is the overall idea, and this is definitely something new, definitely different to all other models that we know, and we will see how far we get.
Excellent. Excellent. Do you plan to take these best practices and use them in other free private cities, sort of like as a franchise model? Or do you believe that each of these cities will have such a unique culture that it would be a bad idea to try to apply them to all?
No, I think that franchising is a good system in this regard, because it's, as you said, it's best practices, and we are already and all the special economic and special administrative zones and even the states, they look at each other and see what's working and what's not working. So I think that a basic framework, once this has been developed in the first free private cities, it probably will be taken over by other cities. That doesn't mean that they don't have their specific own rules, or even a special target group of residents they are attracted to, and they might adapt their rules to that. But I think if it's coming to private law and dispute resolution, this is certainly something, once this is working, probably everybody will, or most other projects will take it over. And if you remember, or if you recall the Hanseatic League, The main city was Lübeck, and most cities took over the Lübeck law just because it was easier, right? Let's just take their law, and even if there's a bigger problem that our courts can't solve, we go to Lübeck and use them as in the court of appeal. I think something like that might happen in the future again, because it's not necessary to invent, especially regarding private law. It's not necessary to invent the wheel new every time. And for many other things, the same might apply for how you set up a security that is working, that is high quality and nevertheless cheap. That is really something that is where franchising does make sense in my view, and that is an idea indeed that you say if and this is the idea of Free Private Cities Limited as a for-profit company. I'm not in it to do it once. I'm in it to do it several times, and be it as an operator or just as a consultant company, whatever. But this is a model that really has the potential to be multiplied several times.
Oh yeah, I definitely see the possibility of this going viral, and I'm glad you mentioned historical examples like the Hanseatic League. I was just about to ask you. There's plenty of startup societies, both historical and contemporary. Which ones do you look at for inspiration or something to emulate?
Yeah, I'm currently writing a book, and just these days I'm working on that front, and I'm looking at the free imperial cities in medieval German and Upper Italy. Then I'm looking at again the Hanseatic League as a way to that those single cities could form a bigger power and even stand up against big powers like Denmark at that time. Then I'm looking to cities like Venice or Republic of Ragusa, which made it for a tremendously long time, nearly 1,000 years. They managed to keep up their independence. And from our times, I'm looking at places like Hong Kong, Singapore, Monaco, where I'm residing myself, or even Dubai is the most recent example. How they did it, how they managed security, immigration, economy, and those things. And there's a lot to learn from them, and you don't have to take everything. But I think each of those examples, be it the old ones or the new ones, they have something where we can say, okay, this is a good way, or at least a feasible way of dealing with a certain problem, right? For example, Monaco is surrounded completely by France. It has sea access, but other than that, I mean, it's so small, and France is so powerful. So there had to be contracts between those two countries or states. It took a while that France was recognizing them as an independent country, but now they have it. And so they had to make some concessions, right? A typical example is that everybody from the surrounding country is moving into your territory because of taxes. And this is making the other country angry, right? So you have to find a way to avoid that or to handle that. And Monaco has basically has agreed that French citizens living in Monaco still pay taxes to France, but everybody else doesn't. Everybody else is free. Monaco has no income tax to come and stay there and enjoy the system of Monaco. So this is one example of how those small entities or the city-states deal with problems that are coming up. So typical small things like the fuel station problem, as we call it in our groups. That is, if you have a certain territory that has an own legal and tax system, and you don't have a mineral oil tax, yes. That means if you or somebody opens a fuel station in your territory, everybody from the surrounding country will come to fuel up. And the other fuel stations will get out of business, and they will get angry at you, and you will get problems in your free private city or special economic zones. So you have to deal with that. So there are some issues how they have been solved already, and you look at them, we look at them, and then we see what we can copy. And again, there's no perfect solution. There's no perfect free world. So you have to muddle through all that issues, keeping always the most personal and economic freedom to your own residents. And if you do that, thereby avoiding really a conflict with the surrounding state or with the host nation, ideally from the beginning, because you know what could happen out of the examples I mentioned, then we have a chance of being successful, I think.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Gebel. It was a pleasure. Hope to have you on again. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Startup Societies Foundation podcast. Hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you. Goodbye.